Um, so on the board page, and I hope, I believe I sent this to Glenn and Amy a while ago, but we try to keep this up to date with information um, in terms of strategic plan, um, board lists and committee chairs. We have a huge board orientation packet, which I may have sent you a link to. I'm really trying to distill some of that information in this call. We have member surveys. You see here the bylaws, further down the org guide, and then from the org guide we have summary of positions, committees and their roles, several policies, forms including conflict of interest, and I should get a conflict of interest form from you, Glenn, if I haven't already. I looked in the folder today, I didn't see one. Okay. And then these are blank forms for board reports from each of the committees, an expense form for CSE if that should arise, copy of the budget, and then some of the agreements that CSE has with other organizations. I'm going to go back to the slides real quick. I know that Glenn and probably Tony participated in 2015 when we did the strategic planning with one of our consultants from Kellen. Actually, he was the former president of Kellen. Do you remember that, Glenn? We did it in Washington. Were you there? I know all the committee chairs. Yeah, yeah. So we developed from that. We developed generally a mission and vision statement. I guess we actually just refined the mission statement a little bit, but generally the vision is to be indispensable in the communication of science. We also developed 6 strategic objectives, which I can show real quick. And we did this really in a day-long session. Um, we brainstormed, well, we got put together the strategic objectives, and then we brainstormed some of the tactics to support each. So this version is, I guess, 3 years old at this point. But we keep this on the website as well. And I have another version where um, I keep updates of where we are. And most of the strategic goals are active. We do have number 5, which is one that we probably didn't pay attention to because we didn't have the resources up front, but it's to define science editors by promoting an understanding of what they do. And there'll be more work done around that. There's a task committee now to develop a roles and responsibilities document for various titles within scholarly publishing, and Angela's taking the lead on that. I left these, and you can have a copy of the slides if you like. Um, whoops. I left my computer's so sensitive. There we go. The strategic objectives in one slide, um, boiled down a little bit. In terms of governance, I'm not going to go too deeply into this, except to say that, as I mentioned, the summary of the responsibilities are on the site. The bylaws, which is really, the legal document that governs CSC. A quick note that the executive committee is comprised of the officers, so that would be the president-elect, the past president, the vice president, the secretary, and the treasurer. The 3 directors at large, which would be Mary Beth Schaefer, Jen Deaton, and Amy McPherson. With them, it's the full board of directors. This is essentially the table of contents from the organizational guide. It's really been my go-to. There are inconsistencies in it, and some of the information is dated in terms of uh, particularly in terms of, say, pricing, what we would pay for a speaker, what a hotel room might cost, or even the flow of the annual meeting. Now that we use a lot more technology, is very different. But it's been helpful when I've had other questions on reimbursements and signing authority. I often turn to it. So there is some helpful information in there. The one other item that I'd like to raise from this list above is just a word about committees. So it may be the same in your organization, but a committee is empowered by the board, and whoever is going to be leading the committee would submit essentially a charge, which would talk about the composition of the committee, what they see as the charge, and how that plays into CSE's overall strategic goals, and also the kind of tasks they'd be completing. If the situation would be, if the situation is that it's a task, for instance, this, what I'm going to call very loosely the salary survey, that pretty much has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's viewed more as a task force or task committee. But we have a number of committees. In fact, we have a short course on the road committee that's going to be proposed fairly soon. And that, I assume, would be an ongoing committee that would manage and coordinate courses when we go to some of the far-flung places we've gone, or even when we do a course on the road domestically. It's a committee that's going to be proposed. It actually hasn't been approved yet, um, but there's certainly a need for it. So I would assume it's going to be approved. Um, I think that's about it in this group. I want to go to finance. We'll start with the budget first. Checking to see if you can see my screen, which you can. So you'll notice when I give this little snapshot of what we've planned for 2018, net expense against the income, you'll see that there's a deficit over 59,000. So I'm going to jump to the budget. So usually in a scramble in the fall, we try to put together an idea for what our programs are going to bring in terms of revenue. Programs being membership and membership dues, annual meeting, registrations, exhibitor fees, etc. Education, what kind of revenue would be driven by the short courses or webinars that we have during the year. Publications revenue, which at this point is primarily royalties on any licenses for access to SSF 8. And then any other interest income or job bank income that we might receive, and under the heading of administration. So the operating budget represents sort of our old view of things, but as you can see, based on assumptions and projections or prior year, by projections I mean current trend in membership, we come up with what we might see in terms of membership, which is this yellow line in the center. Digital associate, we had no history for that. We didn't know what that would generate. Science Center advertising, again, education, short courses, webinars, and annual meeting, which is to say that when we get down to about line, I guess it's 86, we projected revenue of $512,950. Pretty much in a similar fashion, we try to go about the business of getting estimates and or quotes from vendors that we expect to be working for in the next year. Kind of guess what our AV is going to be. It's always bigger than we ever expect. How much it's going to cost us to produce Science Editor print and also our service contract for the platform. In these 4 items that I'm hovering over here, these are all amortized expenses for the redesign, which was complete 2 years ago. How much it's going to cost us in membership. We make generally a membership development or a marketing budget based on what we think we'll be doing in terms of going to other shows or materials, collateral we'll need to produce. Again, the moving parts of the annual meeting. A lot of it is based on prior year. In terms of technology, we've had to go to vendors we're going to be working with, ask them what it was going to cost us. Short course is always a little bit more expensive than we expect, with expenses for bringing in speakers, food and beverage, etc. And we'll move down, and this is where we come up with a total. Sorry, I overshot that. This is a little bit off the screen here for me, sorry. And we came up with an expense planned or projected at 572, which leaves us with a deficit for the year, which was planned and which we've had for 2 prior years, and which we anticipate again in some measure again in 2019. Really based on sort of the good CSE's general financial condition, and that Science Editor and a complete redesign and a web platform was something that CSE wanted for a while. We contracted with Windmill, who also did our website, and decided that we would pay for it up front, but we would amortize the expenses over 36 months, which is fairly normal. It coincides with a number of other expenses, not the least of which sort of a growth spurt on the annual meeting. Expenses, including technology and others, went up. AV is always expensive. And we've worked with a deficit. This is probably a relatively small one based on the 2 prior years. We've done better in both of those years. That's to say that we came in under what we projected on the deficit, but we still planned for one. So nobody really likes to do that, particularly since, as you'll see, and when we get to the financial statements, CSE, I guess it's probably almost 10 years now, or 9 years since it's been with Resource Center and then Kellen, but it came out of pretty much deficit spending generally to have a really healthy reserve. So everyone hates to show a deficit, but everyone really wanted Science Editor. So Andrew and I are going to go about the business of starting the budget hopefully earlier this year. We usually start a little later and have run into the following year, which really holds up our signing on agreements and contracts for the following year. So we're trying to get a jump on it. We also noticed this year, you may have experienced it yourself, that the annual meeting is a little sooner than you think. You know, since I had started with CSC, one year it was quite early in May, and then it had been later in May. This year, suddenly it was the first week in May, and I realized we really only have 4 months after January 1. So we really are in annual meeting mode right after the holidays. We don't really want to be doing a lot with budgeting at that point. Okay, so financial statements. So Tony's seen these for a while. Certainly Carissa has, and we've made some minor changes, but we finally have a new controller, and she brought a new format with her. So the start items on the screen have been changed, and I'm just going to jump over to them real quick to show you how they look now. So I don't have the May just yet. Usually, for the record, we get financials around the 20th of the month. I believe they set the 20th or the 22nd to deliver prior month financials. So if you look at the way we've set them up now, we used to have a much longer statement of financial position, and we've really changed it out and kind of streamlined it. So the balance sheet is really on one page, and I hope you can see it on the screen, but it's organized a little better. If you look down under cash, we have a lot of cash right now because it's April. When we start paying May financials, May meeting expenses, not so much. It will look different. But we have a healthy long-term investment. You'll see it's about a quarter of the way down the page at 824,449. And you can see our total assets at 1.192. The one change on this page is previously we had prior year, but we didn't show variance from prior year, and we didn't show how we closed the prior year. So I find myself in the details a lot, but if the balance sheet is the most important page, I think it's helpful to have more information up front and to know how we finished the prior fiscal year. The second page, and this is where I'm super happy, is that we're now breaking up our revenue expenses by our key revenue and expense areas. So as I mentioned before, the revenue driven by membership, annual meeting, education, publications, and administration is in a summary income statement, which shows what we've done for the month, which has always been there, how we're doing for the year, and then it shows prior year actual and then against our budget. So the prior year in the former format, not only did you have to flip between pages of revenue and what's the expense on that, and here's the revenue for the meeting right now and what's the expense on that, but I also have to flip through prior year financials sometimes to find how we were performing the year before. So essentially we have it all in one page, and then they've taken or summarized a lot of data that we had on a page and a half previously, which were the interest and dividends and the gain and loss in our investments, and also the investment fees, which were also pretty much hidden in the financials. So that's a big change. And again, it's all in one place. And then the general format, when you go into the individual, each program has its own income statement. So as you can see up here, when you look at membership, you can see what we've budgeted at 150, where we are at 125, and what it's cost us in terms of membership and marketing. We've always broken out the annual meeting to its own page so we can really track the performance on it. So this continues to have its own page. These numbers are way off, obviously, because it's April. A lot of revenue coming in, but a lot of the expense hasn't been recognized. But it will be in May and June. That's hard to see. There's a lot of information here. Education is the same thing. It used to be pretty much all over the statements. So you had to, I was always doing a little math in the columns to get an idea for how much it would cost us and how much we were actually seeing as a profit on a particular education event. and now it's all in one place. So there's not a lot of jumping back and forth. Publications, which doesn't have a lot of revenue at this point, although we do expect some royalties to come in on SSF Fate, and then the expenses to putting out Science Editor. These will increase as we begin to produce more issues, obviously. Our regular service agreement, maybe not, but definitely in terms of printing more issues. We've only printed, I think, one in 2018. And then you can see everything that we have in terms of revenue and expense all on the same page. And then the last bit is the restricted funds, also all on one page, which is great. So we show the scholarship fund, and we have the revenue, well, it is revenue, on the AJPP, and the money coming in, and then the money going out. Any questions on financials? There's a lot there. And if you're jotting down notes or if you have questions, by all means, send them to me. There is on the website, I should show real quick. I just fixed the link for it. But Dave Stump, I believe 2 years ago, put together a webinar, Making Sense of Financial Statements. So there's more information in there, and there's a PowerPoint that goes along with it. It's based on our old financial statements, but it's still a great general foundation. Just a quick note on membership. These are our membership types. I assume all of you are worldwide regular members. Student membership, which we reduced last year, we have for emeritus members. Group memberships, contributors and supporters, members at up to 5 or up to 15. Digital associate, which was new this year, which is a digital-only non-US membership. And then developing country, which we've always had. Membership and marketing generally are responsible for recruitment and retention of members, but obviously members can always recruit new members. And our communications to membership, we have President's Letter, which is done monthly on schedule. We've all gotten e-blast. Generally, Andrew manages those. Science Editor, both online and in print. And then social media, which is, you could probably tell me if that's a valuable resource, but we know that people come from Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn to the CSC site a lot. They refer lots of traffic. Liaison relationships. This is not a complete list, but so that you're aware of most of them, and you may know them. AJPP is the African Journal Partnership Program, which has been with Drohan, I guess was the management company at the time, and CSC. It's really a mentorship, and their program provides support and helps journals in Africa get up and running. CSC does administration for them. We offer them discounts on annual meeting and also on education. They come up often at meetings because there's quite a lot of administration, but there's also a receivable invoice that's been dangling for about 4 years that has not been paid and drawn a lot of attention of auditors. Um, so we're talking to AJPP now how to rectify the situation. It seems that the best way is to start a new agreement. Once we start a new agreement, um, CSE should be able to write off that amount. We believe that invoice was paid. We don't believe it's an invoice that was, we think it was double booked. We don't think that it was issued and not paid. ABEC is the Brazilian Association of Science Editors, and the CSC started a mentorship relationship with them to provide education, but also to mentor their own certificate program, which is known as ProPC. And their meeting this year is in September, so two people will go to their meeting, present the short course in publication management. We'll probably do a talk. Each of the presenters will do a talk separately to the attendees or with the attendees, and they have a lot of their members have become part of CSE's certificate program. And COFTS is, well, actually Amy knows COFTS because um, you presented over there last November? Right. And he came to our meeting this spring, last month. Um, yep. Was COFTS and KCSE, how should I, did they do that event together? The one that you were at, or is it completely separate? Mm-hmm. Wow. Got it. And did anybody from CSE participate at COFTS? Hmm. Got it. So it's an interesting note, and it probably speaks to why CSE started to do a memorandum of understanding with each of them, so that those relationships are clearer. Um, with Brazil, it was very unclear, and when their management would change, when their a new regime would come in, CSE really didn't know who our point person was or the nature of what they expected. So it's been helpful. So we have that on the short list to develop one with KCSC. I know that they've made a couple of requests. Chicago Collaborative, which is a group that we have been engaged with for at least 3 or 4 years. Their mission is to promote open communication and education in this scholarly scientific communication area. And then everybody knows ISMTE and SSP, and we've swapped space at meetings so that we have an overlap of members and interested editors, but we also have an opportunity to be on site when they're throwing events. And then just quickly, and the last point is staff, which I guess I certainly know all of you, so I assume you know me, but as you know, Andrew is really the associate director. Whoa. Paula Davini, who you've probably interacted with at the meeting or certainly by email, handles membership for us. And Lynn Pike is based in Atlanta. She is CSC's new controller. One of the many things that I like about Lynn, beside the fact she reformatted our monthly financials, is that she has experience with 2 long-term grants on her resume. So it's been helpful with AJPP, which has been at times difficult to wrangle. The way CSC works generally is they have contracted a management company to handle their general service in terms of board meetings, accounting, etc. And that's more or less what Kellen does, but maybe a little bit more. But generally, uh, Andrew and I manage board and executive committee activities. Um, CSC really is the back office operation, and that's located in Denver. I'm based in New York, but we say that the office is CSC is located in Denver. Finance and accounting is in Atlanta, and that's where Lynn is located. We also manage meetings, including the annual meeting and seminars, which have not been a big part of CSC's program, but webinars have been. We handle membership functions, uh, participate in publications. Um, we have done most of CSC's marketing and communications, um, and then the web is hosted in Denver, and we have staff people in Denver that help us in terms of managing any web-based or internet membership projects, like the new database that CSC will move to. I want to say it's in the end of the summer. We're being trained now, but CSC will move to IMIS. And a lot of other activities that aren't listed here, including grant management with Elsevier and NIH, um, some of the new digital initiatives, including the web platform and moving to an app and taking the meeting abstracts online. Whoops. Um, so that generally covers all the things in my mind. Are there questions that would be helpful to you as you are actually already in your term on the board? So we have, uh, I don't think I mentioned anything on cadence, but it was on my list. So yeah, we schedule 5 executive committee meetings a year. The next executive committee meeting is in July. The board meets 4 times a year, twice in person. Um, we've already had obviously our May meeting. Um, our next one is scheduled for October 25th, which is a tough date for many people. We've had a hard time moving that, but we're working on it. Um, Anna, who's the president, is quite limited because she has travel right before and right after those dates. And I'm working on a schedule for 2019. So there would be a call in the January, February timeframe, and then there would be an in-person board meeting in Columbus. The full board includes the directors, which would be you, Jen, and Mary Beth. Yeah. But so the executive committee calls are the officers, and they meet separately and 5 times a year on a call. Nope. 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 No. We've invited, I mean, in any call, actually, we've invited, various people when they were in the midst of projects or special requests. But yeah, you don't have to be on the executive committee calls.